Hello, everybody, and welcome to Trinity Tuesday. I hope that you can hear me. I hope that the sound is working wherever you're watching from. My name is Rob Tell. I'm the Assistant Minister at Trinity Church, Scarborough. And tonight, we're really excited to welcome you to Trinity Tuesday, where each Tuesday night over this period, we want to tackle some of the biggest questions of life, the biggest questions that we have about God, who he is he there? What's he like? And tonight we have this fantastic opportunity to think about this particular subject of is there a God? Is there a God? Even today, as I've been on social media and different things, following different conversations, it's been fascinating to see different people's views on this question. Some people think, oh, God is just a fairy tale. Other people think, no, there's good reason. There's good reason to believe in a God. And tonight we're going to explore some of those things together. So it's great that you can join us. This event is hosted by Trinity Church Scarborough, but it is really an event, an online event for anyone. So whoever you are, wherever you're watching from, we're really pleased you can join us. You might call yourself a Christian. You might call yourself something else. You might just be confused about what you believe. But that's all right, because together we want to just spend a little bit of time, carve a little bit of time out in life just to think through some of these big things. So the way we're going to do things tonight, in a moment, I'm going to hand over to Lee McMunn, who is our senior minister at Trinity Church Scarborough, and he's just going to present a few thoughts for us at the beginning. He's got some thoughts, which is great, and he's going to share them to really get us thinking. And so we're really looking forward to that. After Lee's finished talking, we're going to have a short little break in between. So you can get up, stretch your legs, go and grab a drink. But in that time, it's a great opportunity for you to ponder any questions, maybe off the back of what Lee has said. Maybe you have other questions that you've already got. And we'd love you to send them in to us tonight. And then after that little break, we're going to try and have a go at answering some of them. So the way you can send in your questions tonight, if you're watching on Zoom, as some of you are, then you can use the chat function. If you send your questions to Q&A using the chat function, then we'll take them in. If you're watching on YouTube, then please use the comment section that's been watched, so we can see your question and we'll try and take it in. We'll do our best. And then, of course, on Facebook with our live stream, if you're watching there, then use the comment section as much as you like to put any questions forward. We'd love to take them in and have a go at answering them. But as I say, it's great. It's great that you can join us. It's a huge subject, a really important subject, and I'm looking forward to hearing Lee talk more to us about it. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Lee McMunn.
Great, thank you. So thanks, Rob, so much for that. And let me welcome you as well, whether you're on Zoom, whether you are on Facebook or YouTube. It's great that you've joined us. And we look forward to exploring this kind of big question with each of you. Is there a God, and how can we know the truth? And we'd love you to send some questions, comments afterwards. What I want to do as we begin is, particularly if you're on Zoom, actually, can I encourage you? I said this last week when we did it. It's very odd to be able to speak when there's absolutely no sound comes back from anybody. So I was encouraging those on Zoom last week just to smile occasionally, just to show that. There we go. There's at least one person smile back at me. So that's very good. And whatever you do, as I said last week, if you're tempted to fall asleep or anything like that, do switch off your video. That's very helpful. What I thought we'd do as we think about, is there a God and how can we know the truth? I wanted to start by just making three initial comments, three initial observations that I think are helpful as we try and get our head around these kind of big questions. So I hope these are helpful for you. Here's the first observation. First, I just want to think about what are the implications if there isn't a God. Okay, so we want to think about, is there a God and what's the evidence, what's the proof? But let's just think first, what are the implications for us if there isn't a God? So beneath and behind, beyond all the activity of our life, beyond all the busyness, what is our life worth? What does it all add up to if there isn't a God? Well, here we go. Here's the good news story that you've all been waiting for, that you wanted to tune in for. If there isn't a God, then our lives are pretty meaningless. Okay. We're not going to end with this, okay? That's how we're going to start. But if there isn't a God, our lives are pretty meaningless. Like, we might try and pack them full of stuff. Our diaries might be crammed with activities. But if there isn't a God, then basically we are here today, we are gone tomorrow, and we will be forgotten within a couple of generations. And that's quite sobering, isn't it? We might be remembered by our kids. If you've got kids, I hope I'll be remembered by my kids. And maybe their kids as well might have some idea who their grandfather is. But beyond that, I think actually we're stretching it if we actually think we'll be remembered. Now, most of us don't really contemplate the implications of that fact if there isn't a God. But there was a man a few years ago who did do that, a man called Samuel Beckett. And Samuel Beckett wrote a play. I've told some of you this before, but it's quite an interesting play. It's a play where he tried to communicate the result of living in a world where there wasn't a bigger story being told by a bigger God. And the play's called Breath. Now, I don't know if you like going to the theater. I don't know if you like getting your money's worth, but let me tell you something about Breath. It is 35 seconds long. Okay. It has no human actors, and the props consist of a pile of rubbish on the stage. And there's a light, and this is how it begins. There's a pile of rubbish on the stage, and then there's a light that is lit that begins to dim. It brightens, but never fully, and then it fades again. Okay, that's the props. There are no words, only a recorded cry at the beginning, an inhaled breath, an exhaled breath, and then the identical recorded cry at the end. So there you go. What do you think? Do you want to go and see? You want to go see Breath? 35 seconds long. Good money's worth. That's it. What was Samuel Beckett trying to say? He was trying to say that if you don't have a God, it doesn't really matter how busy your diary is, how many activities you do. Our life is like that. It's here today, it's gone tomorrow, and it doesn't actually amount to much at all. He was prepared to live with the consequences of if there was nothing more beyond what we can see and touch. Now, let me say, it's not good enough simply to believe in something because we cannot handle the truth. You might remember that film where that comes from. You cannot handle the truth. It's not good enough simply to believe in something because you cannot handle the truth of there not being a God, if that was the truth. However, I just wanted to begin just by thinking with you, if you don't believe in a God, it's got massive, serious implications of the meaning of our life. In fact, it is catastrophic if God doesn't exist. Now, I want to, by the end of the talk, I hope to have persuaded you that there is a God, but let's just start, okay? If you think there isn't a God, live with the implications of that just for a moment, and it's rather scary. Okay, that's the first observation. Second observation is that the majority of human beings have always believed in some sort of God. And it seems to me that many Christians in the UK that I know feel a little bit embarrassed when they start telling their friends or their family that they believe in a God. It's almost like they feel they're in a very small minority. They often feel that they are the ones that need to argue for God's existence, rather than it being the responsibility of an atheist to argue for their position. However, I think it's good for you to know that the default position for human beings around the world and throughout human history hasn't been atheism. And it's been theism. Now, theism is just a word that means belief in some sort of God. But that's been the default position. It is the default position of humanity now and throughout human history. That is, the majority of humans have believed in some sort of higher power. I tested this a couple of years ago. I was in Scarborough. That's where we are if you're tuning in from further afield. But in Scarborough on North Bay, we've got two bays. And I was on North Bay and I was doing a little survey of passers-by. I don't know if you would fancy being stopped by me on a promenade of a beach and being asked some random questions. But that's what I was doing with a few others. And the first question we decided to ask people was this: what kind of God do you believe in? Now, we decided not to ask the question, do you believe in a God? We decided to ask, what kind of God do you believe in? I still remember there was a group of teenage lads coming towards me. And I don't know what you would feel like if a group of teenage lads is approaching you. Many people were thinking, how do I escape from this? And I thought, oh, this is great. What a good challenge this is. So we stopped the lads And we said to them, what kind of God do you believe in? I think one of the first lads said, oh, I don't really believe in a God. And I went to him, big smile on my face, said, really? You don't believe in a God? How can that be the case? And he was kind of a bit taken aback. And I said, look, the majority of human beings around the world and throughout human history have believed in a God. And are you telling me that you don't believe in a God? I can't believe it. He was a little bit taken aback by that because he kind of assumed that his position was the normal position. Now, of course, the majority of people can be wrong. However, given that the majority of human beings have always believed in some sort of higher power, I think we should be slightly more sure of ourselves and a little bit humble before dismissing the majority of humanity as being intellectually and emotionally stupid. So I think that's just another observation, okay? The majority of humans have believed in some sort of God, or put it more positively, if you believe in God, you will not be in a very small minority of people. If you believe in God, you join the majority of human beings throughout history. So that's the second observation. Third observation is that it's becoming increasingly popular to believe that even if there is a God, we can't really know the truth about what God is like. That's becoming quite popular. I think it's good to know that. So you may have come across the picture of a group of blind people grasping some part of an elephant and trying to describe what they see. So imagine the scene. You got this huge elephant and you got a bunch of blind people and they're all kind of grasping out to describe what they're seeing. And so one of them maybe has grabbed the trunk of the elephant and they're feeling it and they're thinking, oh, that's this elephant, it's really like a snake, isn't it? It's really long and thin. Another blind person has grabbed the leg of the elephant and they think, this elephant is really like a tree. It's big. It's like a tree trunk. It's really round and big and strong. And maybe another person has just grabbed the side of the elephant and they think, oh, this is really tough and long and straight. That's what an elephant is like. And then people say, oh, actually, well, to be honest, to get the full picture of the elephant, we need all your views. You've got a little bit of an information. You've got another bit of information, but you can't really see because you're blind the whole picture of the elephant. And a lot of people will say, look, discussing God's a bit like that. So we can agree that there is a God, that there is some sort of God, but the different religions all around the world, what they're doing is, Christianity's got the trunk, and we can describe God like this. And maybe Islam has got the legs, and maybe Hinduism has got the body. And then you go on and on and on. But actually, no one religion, no one person can fully describe God. We can't really know the truth. And therefore, what we've got to do is we've got to believe what works for us and allow anybody else to believe what works for them. That is, that there is a God, but we can't really know the truth. However, just following this picture, what if we could get our blindfolds removed? Okay, what if we could actually see properly? Well, that would change the entire picture. Or what if the elephant could speak to us? Now, this is a bit bizarre. I know it is. Okay. But that would just change everything, wouldn't it? If the object that we are trying to describe, what if that object could reveal itself and describe itself? Now, if the prospect of an elephant speaking to you is just a bit too weird to contemplate at this time of evening, let me change the picture ever so slightly. Imagine that you are in a room. The room that you're in at the moment, it's you're trapped in this room with a bunch of people. Suppose everybody watching on Zoom and YouTube and Facebook is in this room with you. I don't know if that's a happy thought or not. And there's no windows and there's no doors. And we're all trapped in and we've no idea what's on the outside. And we want to try and work out, is there anything on the outside? And then someone starts to speak and says, I think on the outside there are some really big pink giraffes. That's what I've been thinking about for ages, big pink giraffes. And then somebody else says, no, I've got a feeling in my heart that what's on the outside of these walls are really small green monkeys. And then somebody else says, no, I know that there's nothing outside these walls, but you just cannot live with that truth. So you've invented something that makes your life more bearable. Now, at this point, who's right? At this point, we don't know who's right, do we? Because nobody in the room has access to the outside world. So it might be the monkeys, it might be the giraffes, or it might be nothing, but we don't really know. Or it might be none of the above. But at this point, if nobody's got access to the outside of the room, we're all guessing and therefore there might be something. But what you've got to do is just let everybody believe what they want to believe. That's what an increasing number of people believe has happened in our world, so that we have no access to the truth about God. What we need is someone from the outside to come into our world and reveal the truth. But if that hasn't happened, all we're left with is guesswork. So there are three initial observations. Okay, let me tell you then, what persuades me as a Christian, what persuades me that there is a God? I want to give you two reasons tonight why I believe that there is a God, and what I believe we can truly know about what God is like. So it's not just about do I believe in a God. I want to share with you some of what I believe we can truly know about what that God is like. So first reason I believe in a God is because of the world I see around me. Not just the world I see around me, the world that you see around you. Now, what kind of world do we see around us? I think it's a world that bears all the hallmarks that it's been designed. It's been designed by a powerful, intelligent, generous, and beautiful creator. I think that is the world that we see around us. It looks like it's designed, and it's been designed by a powerful, intellectual, generous, and beautiful creator. Now, the thing is, we instinctively recognize when something has been designed. Now, I want to give you two examples. And I like you, whether you are watching on YouTube or Facebook or on Zoom, when I show you the two examples, see if you can work out what one you think has been designed. You ready? Okay. So not designed by me. This one has not been designed by me. But let me show this to you. Okay. Do you see that? There's Exhibit A. I'll just turn it around. In case you have just tuned into YouTube, this is not one of these YouTube Lego channels that you've tuned into. Maybe after tonight it might be. But there we are. This is technically called Yoda's ship. So there's Exhibit A. That's one. Let me just show you something. Okay, I'm just gonna do something right here. I don't know if you can see this. I don't know how to actually show this to my camera. There's Exhibit B. Some random stuff on a plate. It is pretty obvious, isn't it, which one of these has been designed? You look at it instinctively and you think, when you see this, that's not just been some Lego thrown in a bag and it's just emerged randomly. You know, a little 8-year-old boy, my son, has spent hours putting this together, and I'm trying not to drop it as I speak. We know instinctively when we look at stuff what has been designed. And what happens is, as you look and as I look at the world around us, we see things that are far more complicated than Yoda's Lego ship absolutely every single day. And everything that we see around us, we are supposed to conclude, because it screams at us, that this world has been designed by a powerful God. Now, in fact, that's what the Bible says. Let me see if I can share my screen with you. Okay, and I just want to show you something from the Bible. So this is from the Old Testament, from one of the Psalms, and Psalm 19, and it says this: the heavens declare the glory of God. That's something like the magnificence and the splendor of God. So the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth. Their words to the end of the world. Do you see what the Bible is saying? That as we look at the creation, as we look at the world around us, it is screaming to us. It is speaking to us. It is preaching to us something about the magnificence and the power and the generosity and the beauty of God. You see that, don't you, whenever you walk around and you see the magnificent sunset and you see the magnificent the trees and the flowers and so on, and you just think, look at all the textures, look at all the colors. Who has done this? The complexity is huge and enormous. And it's not just the complexity, it's the beauty. And behind all this stands the God who made it. Now, let me ask you this. Why do you think, even though instinctively we see design all over the place in other things, so many people don't recognize the fingerprints of God in the world that he has created. Well, let me mention two things. First, I think we're so used to people describing and attributing God's design to other people or other things, particularly Mother Nature. If you ever watch the kind of David Attenborough programs or anything like those, listen closely to the language that David Attenborough uses, or something like him. He is forever using the language of design, isn't he? He's forever saying, wow, look at this. This looks like it's been designed. But then at the end of all the programs, rather than attributing that to the God of the Bible, the creator God, he starts talking about attributing this to some vague Mother Nature force. But he sees, as we all see, that the complexity and the beauty cannot be here by chance. But he always falls short of attributing it to what we really know, is that there is a God who has made us. So that's the first thing. We're used to people just ascribing the design to Mother Nature. But second, and maybe this might touch with you, I think we're scared of the implications of saying that the world has been made by a creator. We see it everywhere. That's the obvious thing, but we're a little bit scared, because if we say there is a creator who designed the universe, that means that there is a creator who designed me. And the problem with that is that this is why we're a bit frightened of this, because we know the link that whatever you make belongs to you. And therefore, if you start saying in the world that there is a creator who made the world and he made us, that means that we belong to him. And that means that he has the right to tell us how to live, and that we are accountable to that God, the God who has made us. And yet we don't really want that. So what happens so often is that we see the obvious design features around us, and yet we suppress the truth of God's design because we don't really want to take the implications to our heart, that there is a good God who loves us, but who owns us. And yet, and hopefully as I've said this to tonight, look around you tomorrow, look around you tonight, the whole creation screams and preaches to us that the world is not here by chance. And that's a fantastic thing. We don't want to be here by chance. We want there to be a God, and that's what the world screams at us. It has been designed by a powerful, intelligent, generous, and beautiful creator. Now, that's one of the reasons I believe in God, but there's another one I want to share with you tonight. Not just the world that I see around me, but I believe in a God because of the Jesus I see in the Bible. See, Jesus existed. There's no doubt about that. Nobody's really arguing anymore that there wasn't a person that we could have met 2,000 years ago, if we were in the right place at the right time, a person called Jesus. The big question has always been, who was he? And I just want to read you an example of one of the things that Jesus did that just raises the stakes about the true identity of Jesus. So let me show you the next little bit, if I can get this to work. So here is another little bit from the Bible, from Mark's Gospel. And this is what it says about Jesus. That day, when evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let us go to the other side. Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, Teacher, don't you care if we drown? He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, Quiet, be still. Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Now listen to this. They were terrified and asked each other, Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. Now, do you see that they were terrified at the very start of the story? These were hardened fishermen. The storm was huge. They thought they were going to die. It was so big. They were terrified. They wake up Jesus and they say, Don't you care? Jesus gets up, says to the wind and the waves, Quiet, be still. They stop. And what's their response? They're even more terrified. Because who is this that can control the wind and the waves? Why are they terrified? Because they've seen Jesus do something with their eyes that only God can do. Stop the wind and the waves. Now, I try it at home. Okay, later tonight, once we're finished, do an experiment for me. I'm going to have a bath. Okay, get all your favorite ducks, bath toys, all lined up. And then start making some waves. Okay, make sure the door's shut in the bathroom and stuff like that. Make as big as waves as you can. And then when you know nobody's listening, raise your voice and say, "Quiet, be still," and see what happens. Or if you're braver, head out tomorrow if you're in Scarborough into North Bay. Get some friends with you, obviously socially distanced, 2 meters and all that sort of stuff. And then they'll go out with you. And when it's really stormy on North Bay, just turn around and say to them, "Listen, everybody, watch this." And say, "Quiet, be still." Now, what's going to happen? Well, your friends are going to go, "Oh, I think lockdown's got to them a little bit. I think they need a little bit more fresh air." But imagine you said that and they stopped. What would your friends think then? Well, of course, you don't think that's going to happen. And you might be hearing this incident about Jesus doing this and you think, can we really believe this happened? But let me say to you, what if Jesus really was God himself come into the world? Do you not think that he would start doing things that only God can do? And what Jesus did, he did come into the world and he did make some outrageous claims, and he then backed them up by doing things that only God could do. Let me stop sharing my screen with you. It's one thing, isn't it, to claim that you are a certain person with great abilities. It is quite another thing to prove it. Now, if you're on the Zoom call at the minute, you'll know that we've muted everybody's microphones. The only microphone that is not muted is mine, which is tremendous for me. Maybe you want to say some words as well. But just suppose I said to you, I am the greatest singer in the world. Okay. Now, many of you in Zoom would love to scream out if we hadn't muted your microphones. Prove it, prove it. But you could, of course, use the chat option and say that anyway. And suppose then I decided to sing. I could sing you one of your favorite songs. And I think you would know very, very quickly, within seconds, that my claim was certainly not true. And I think you'd be asking me to mute my own microphone. I could make a big claim, but the evidence would suggest something else. Jesus Christ, you see, came into the world and he claimed to be the divine Son of God. He claimed to be one of the three divine persons of the Trinity who was responsible for creating the entire universe. And he came into our world and he dared to claim that he was the Son of God walking in the world. And people were crying out, "Prove it." And do you know what he did? He proved it. He did lots of miracles that only God could do. This is God calming a storm in front of the eyes of other people so that they cry out, "Who is this?" And the answer is, this is the Son of God come into the world. But you see, this is the game changer that we need. We're talking about the existence of God. Remember the room, trapped in the room, access from the outside? We need someone from the outside to come and tell us and reveal the truth to us so that we stop guessing. We need God himself to come into the world to tell us. And the great news is from the Bible, that's what's happened. God has come in. The Son of God has come in to reveal the truth. So it's not just the creation around us, it's the Jesus we meet in the Bible that allows us to know the truth, that there is a God, but more than just there is a God. Jesus doesn't just prove that God exists, he reveals what God is like. Now, what do we discover about God as we listen to Jesus? Let me just say 4 quick facts about Jesus, and then we'll finish, and then we have some time for tea, coffee, and any questions from you. Jesus says, as we listen to him, that God is a bit more like a divine family. 3 members. It's called the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. This is the divine family of perfect love. So the love that you are searching for in your heart, the love that you search for in other people, and you ask yourself the question, why am I so desirous of loving relationships? Well, the very God who made you is a relationship of perfect love. And therefore, God has created us in such a way that we desire and love relationships. God is much more like a family, but second, that God deserves to be in charge. God's our creator. God's our king. And therefore, that's really vital to know. God's not some sort of tyrant, some sort of cosmic killjoy, but the God who made us is the God who made us. He is the God who's in charge of us. He's not trying to ruin our life, but neither is God the divine janitor that we tell what to do. God's in charge, and God's a king. Jesus also says that God is the judge who has promised to judge us for our rebellion. God's in charge of our life. We would much rather decide for ourselves how we would live in God's world. We'd much rather set up our own little kingdoms. And yet God says that's called cosmic treason. And there's a price to be paid for when you rebel against the creator of the universe. Jesus reveals that there is a day of judgment to come that we all deserve that day of accountability when God will judge us for how we have lived. It's uncomfortable, but Jesus loves us enough to look us in the eye and tell us the truth. And yet it doesn't end there, because not only is God in charge, not only are we guilty of treason and deserve God's judgment, but Jesus says God loves us. He loves us, and he wants to rescue us. The very fact of Jesus' presence in the world. Why was the Son of God sent into the world? Not to spoil our day, not to simply come and say, hey, you guys, you've rebelled against God and now you're stuffed. Enjoy the rest of your life until the day of judgment. No, he says, I've come to rescue you. I've come to save you. I've come to die on a cross so that I can pay the price for all your sins. And it's even better than that. It's not simply that Jesus says, I'm going to offer you forgiveness and now you can go and do what you want and live as you please. No, the God we've rebelled against so loves us that he wants us to know him, to know his love and joy, and not just in this life, but forevermore. Now, how should we respond to Jesus' revelation of what he says about God? Friends, we should respond with humble faith. That is, we should believe what Jesus says. Suppose you come onto the Zoom call or maybe you're watching on YouTube or Facebook and you didn't know anything about me at all. You might have seen my name, but you didn't know anything about me at all. And before I unmuted my mic, you decided to try and guess about where I'm from, maybe something about my family, my favorite film, my favorite food, all that sort of stuff. And then I unmuted my mic and I spoke to you and I said, hey, this is where I'm from. This is why my accent is a bit strange. These are my favorite film, my favorite food, blah, 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 blah. And I told you the truth about myself. Now, how should you respond to what I've said? Well, really, you should believe me. You should believe that I kind of know better because I can speak the truth about myself pretty clearly. So that's how you should respond. It would be a little bit weird, wouldn't it, if I said, hey, my favorite food is paella. And you said, no, it isn't. It's Burger King. All right. And I said to you, I'm really from Scotland. And you said, no, you're not. It's not pantomime, by the way, but you kind of get the idea that that sort of response is not just weird, but it could be really arrogant. So when we hear Jesus, the Son of God, reveal the truth about God, we're not supposed to go, oh, that's an interesting idea, Jesus, but I disagree with that. We're supposed to think, you know what you're talking about because you're the divine Son of God. So we're supposed to respond with humble faith. Now, the good news is, even though we started with this idea of what would the world be like without a God, the great news is that we can know for sure that there is a God and we can know what he's like. And it's not make-believe. Being a Christian is not about chucking your brain. It's about responding in faith to the evidence as it's been presented before us. So there's a taste, there's a start of our question. I'm going to hand over to Rob, who's going to explain what we're going to do next.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Lee. Lots of thought-provoking things there for us. So do be pondering some of what Lee has just talked about. And perhaps you've got questions or thoughts off the back of that, or even comments that you'd like to put to us. Now is a great time for you to do that. We're going to have a little break so you can stretch your legs. You can grab a coffee or a tea or if something you like to drink, and then we're going to come back together in 5 or 10 minutes and think through some of those questions. So if you do have questions, just to remind you, there's 3 ways you can send them in. If you're on Zoom, you can use the chat function. Just send them to Q&A. And we'll collect them. If you are on Facebook live stream, then send your questions in the comment section there. We'll spot them. And also on YouTube in the same way, use the comment section. We'll pick them up and then we'll think through some of the questions together. Well, welcome back, everyone. If you've grabbed a coffee or a cup of tea, or you've been to the loo or whatever, good to have you back with us. We are going to have a think through some of the questions we've been thinking about, we've been thinking over, and we're going to put them to Lee, hopefully, and we're going to hopefully have a little bit of a chat through some of them. So I'm going to hand over to Lee, who's going to help us think through some of these questions. We've got 1 or 2 come in. So hopefully Lee is going to appear on the screen as well. And there we go. Lee, are you happy to take some questions?
Yeah, fine. We can have a chat about it. So I can always throw them back to you.
Oh, great. That's what I was hoping for. Some big questions. Okay, we're going to start with the first one that came in, actually. And we've got a couple of questions along the similar kind of thread, which is a brilliant question. And it's this: it seems that you, Lee, are saying that the only way to find God is through Jesus. Do you believe that there are other paths to God? You talked a lot about Jesus in the last bit. So are we saying that Jesus is the way to God? What about other religions and things like that?
Yeah, great question. It's got so many dimensions to it. Let me give a start, and then maybe if you want to chip in, we can have a chat about this. I think fundamentally, I want to say that rather than the idea that we, humanity, are trying to find our way to God, it's the very reverse. That God in his wonderful mercy and grace has come to us. It's just completely different picture, isn't it? So the idea of paths, the idea of like climbing up a mountain, for example, is all this idea of human beings trying to make their way to the top of the mountain, and maybe that we, by our effort and our ingenuity, can get to the top. Human beings have always had stories like that, in terms of that we're the ones that can do it, we can make it. That's what we like to think of ourselves as. But actually, the Bible's picture is very reverse of that. There's many ways. It's not that we're even looking for God at all. It's like we're running away. Is that we don't want to find the truth about God because we'd much rather hide from God and do our own thing, even though that's the madness of that, because it leads us into all sorts of problems. And yet, despite of all that, it's that Jesus had come into the world and to reveal the truth. So I think that's the first thing I want to say to that, actually, that Jesus has come to us. So that the direction is really, really important. Another thing I'd say to that is that it's not so much that here I am saying this, because if it was just little me with my opinions about what God is like, how arrogant I would be. So it's not that at all. It's I'm kind of trying to pass on the message that Jesus has said. So Jesus himself comes into, remember, he knows the truth. He knows, even though it might not be popular, he kind of knows the truth, and he loves us enough to tell us the truth. So he could have come into the world and he could have said, look, it doesn't really matter what you believe as long as you believe it sincerely. You know, wherever you're born, if that's what works for you, do your best and that'll be fine. We'll all arrive at the end of whatever path we're on, and we'll all face the same destination. He could have said that. And he could have just cleared everything up and said, oh, and we would have went, oh, yeah, great. That's what we all thought. But he didn't say that. He came into the world and he dared to say, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. I'm just quoting from the Bible from you. That's from John's Gospel, chapter 14 and verse 6. And that's what he said. So you're thinking, okay, right. So what do I do at this point? I've got a few options. Either I can say, whoa, Jesus, that's a bit harsh, isn't it? I'm not sure I like that. We can't really be having that around here. Well, that's quite a dangerous thing that's quite an arrogant thing to say to Jesus. It might bring you some popularity and so on. It might get you invited to all sorts of occasions where people believe that sort of thing. But it does put you out of sorts with the creator of the universe and what he actually says is true. And yet it's a wonderful thing to know, actually, from Jesus, because I really want to know in the big things of life. I want clarity. I don't want vagueness. You know, if I go into a flight, if I'm ever allowed to board a flight again and fly somewhere, and what I really like is the idea of when the pilot comes on, a female or male pilot, whatever we've got, comes on. What you really want is confidence, don't you? I want the pilot to come on and say, "This is where we're going. This is how long it will take us. This is how high we're going to fly." And you think, great, this is good. The last thing I want is a pilot that comes on and goes, I'm not really quite sure what I'm doing. I'm hoping I'll get the flight off the ground, but we might not. We might. And if it gets a bit windy, I don't know what to do. At that point, I don't want to be on this flight, because in the big things of life, you want certainty. And so it might be countercultural, but Jesus himself, who knows what he's talking about, he comes into the world. And he tells us the truth in the big things of life. So I'd say that. And maybe one last thing, and then if you want to, I guess I'm stealing all your ideas at the minute, but if you want to, but one, if I had to be controversial, and I hope this doesn't confuse anybody, people talk about, do all paths lead to God? One of the answers to that question is yes, they do. All paths do lead to God. And what I mean by that is, there is nothing that we can do in our life that will avoid an encounter with the true God of the Bible. So whatever path you're on, you're going to get to the true God of the Bible. The bigger question is what's going to happen when you arrive. Okay, so everybody's going to get to meet the God of the Bible, whatever path you're on. The biggest question of all is what's going to happen when you arrive in his presence. And according to Jesus, the only way that you will arrive in God's presence as a friend and not an enemy is if you have followed the path of Jesus, because he's the one that can rescue you. So everybody's going to meet God. The question is, are you going to meet him as a judge or as a friend? And Jesus says, follow me. And you get there by meeting God as a friend. Anyway, what is that what you were?
That's what I was looking for. Yeah, that's really helpful. I've got nothing to say, but I do.
I'm going to spotlight you so you can add to that. You're spotlighted.
I've not got a lot to add, but I do find it fascinating the way that you, but also the way that clearly the Bible introduces Jesus to us as a person, not simply an idea. So there are things to know about a person that are actually true. So people watching this might have all kinds of ideas like me, and you got to this in kind of what you said earlier. People might have all kinds of ideas about who I am, but they might be wrong. And you might have completely the wrong end of the stick. So the best way to find out about me is I'll tell you that I love rugby. I'll tell you what food I like to eat. And I'll tell you that I probably eat too much food. But I will tell you those things, and then you can know. And we might come on to some of those other questions about the personal, how we can know the personal Jesus. But leading on from what you've just been talking about, we are going to be introduced to God at some point. And here's a question that we need to grapple with that someone's asked. And it's this: why is our rebellion against God so serious? Why is our rebellion against God so serious? I'm going to hand back over to you first on that.
Fine. Okay, I'll say a couple of things, and then you can chip in as well. And but obviously I get first go, don't I? So then you're thinking, oh, what's he going to say? I'll say a couple of things just to get the conversation started, and then maybe go a little bit deeper. First, the reason it's so serious is because God says it is. Okay, so that's a good start, isn't it? Before we go deeper in terms of why that might be, I think the starting point has to be because God says it is, and remember, God knows the truth, so He's got the greatest perspective on things, and so therefore He reveals very clearly in the Bible that it's very serious. So if you learn nothing else, that's a great place to begin and a great place to end, because what you're then doing is you're taking God at his word. And that's a very good place to be, actually, to humbly say, it may be emotionally where I'm at the moment, I don't quite get it, but I'm going to believe by faith that God knows better. And therefore God says it's very, very serious. And therefore I'm going to accept that. Okay, that's really helpful, because one of the things it might say is that we often can get it wrong. I don't know if you've ever got something wrong in your life before. I get things wrong all the time. My tiny little brain may not be able to have the proper perspective on things. And therefore, that's the best starting point. God says it's serious, and therefore it is. Second thing I say is that if you want to realize the seriousness of our rebellion against our Creator, we've got to look at the rescue plan. Okay, so the rescue plan reveals the seriousness of what we need to be rescued from. So if it wasn't very, very serious, we wouldn't need a massive rescue effort. We see that all the time in our lives, don't we? In terms of the greater danger somebody is in, the greater the rescue forces have to go out and get them. If someone's on a little dinghy on North Bay and they're just a little bit out from the shore, probably the easiest way to rescue them is for maybe a parent to get in and drag them out. Okay, but if they're actually on a ship that is sinking in the North Sea, which is on fire and it's icy and it's stormy, what you don't want is like me diving in with my rubber dinghy to try and rescue people. You want all the rescue services out, because it's really, really serious. So you can actually tell the seriousness of the danger by looking at the proportion of the rescue. Now, when we look about the rebellion against our Creator, what was the rescue? Jesus, the Son of God. Jesus, the Son of God, is sent into the world. He takes on human flesh, and he goes to die on a cross and an agonizing death. He is tortured. He is strung up on a cross, and here you get the enormity of the rescue, that if it took the eternal Son of God to come and die on a cross once and for all, to experience the judgment of God, if our rebellion wasn't serious, why would he do that? Okay, why would he do it? So one of the ways we get the understanding of the magnitude of a rebellion is when we look at the solution. And the cross simultaneously tells us about the enormity of God's love for us. I mean, enormity of God's love for us, and the enormity of our rebellion. As it simultaneously does that. So if you want to think, why is it so serious? We'll look at the cross. Whoa. And yet, as we gaze at the cross, we also see the enormity of the love of God, who comes to rescue us so that we can know him. I've got maybe one thing I could say, but Rob, do you want to say, is that?
Well, I think it's fascinating that as you look at the cross, which is really the heart of Christianity. If you want to know what Christianity is about, then you talk about the cross, you think about the cross, you work out what it's all about, but you see the character of the God of the Bible there. His holiness, which is a word the Bible used to describe God's set apartness, his absolute perfection and difference, but then the love. And I often think, if God is the creator and we are the creatures, then I can understand that God is going to be completely, in many ways, different. The Bible says we're like God in some ways, but also he's different. He's the one who made time. He's timeless. He's the one who made space. He's vast. He's bigger than the universe. He's enormous. He's perfect. He's the definition of what is right, of what is perfect. I expect that God to be different and holy and vast. And when I have that big picture of God, rather than the small picture of God that I can so easily tend towards, I can begin to understand a little bit more why God takes sin so seriously, because he's big and he has a right to tell us how to live. We are just his creatures ultimately, but he loves us.
Right. And I think my one thing I'd add, just as point, that's right in terms of getting right in terms of creator creature, and this kind of leads on to what I was going to say. I think this is a helpful way of thinking about it, is that we understand instinctively in life that certain actions against one of God's creatures, the level of seriousness increases depending on what the object is. So, for example, if you're out in the park and you deliberately squash a worm or cut a worm in half, okay, that's a horrible thing. You shouldn't be doing that. You need to be just cutting worms in half. But actually, if you cut a worm, I'm not going to call the police. Okay, if I see you in the park and you get hold of a cat, okay, and you decide to like kill a cat, okay, that's actually more serious than a worm. You shouldn't be doing any of them, but actually, it's actually more serious. You kind of know that. So there's going to be more severe consequences if you do that. If I see you in the park and you've got a child, and you really harm a child, it's actually more serious than a cat. Okay, you shouldn't be doing any of that. But do you see what's happened is we've gone up the categories. In terms of, and so therefore the same action against that is getting more and more serious. Now, what I want you to do now is to now go up a category again, an infinite category, which is to your creator. And therefore, as what happens is, you see, the higher you got the categories, the actions get much more serious. So the vertical height of our rebellion against God, because God is infinitely beautiful, infinitely wise, infinitely holy, that because we've rebelled against that God, he is infinitely perfect. Therefore, that is why it is absolutely massively serious. And therefore, if you're ever struggling to think through the duration of the judgment, the consequences, because the Bible talks about eternal judgment, and people think, how can this sort of rebellion against God now deserve eternal judgment? Well, actually, it's about, you see the categories? It's the infinite height of our sin leads to the infinite duration of our punishment. That's the way it works. But we started with saying, how do you know it's serious? Because God says it is. All right, there you could start and end there. Go to the cross, realize that God is holy, and then that'll take you to the next dimension. So I think you can see, but this is not, we don't want to end here by saying that it's just really serious. We want to say, wake up to that, but then run to the mercy of God, because that is a God who wants to have us home. Anyway, that might be the time we've got tonight. Actually, I think it's just gone 9 o'clock. So let me hand back to.
Sadly, that is the time we've got, but it's a great place to end as we think about the question of, is there a God? Well, we run back to the love of God. We run back to the place where we see that actually, because we have a God, there is value on us, and there is love for us from that God, and to know that love and to know that God is the greatest thing in life. So that is a great place to end. Another thing to say as well, that might, just as we finish. We've talked a lot about what the Bible says. One of my encouragements to people who are just thinking stuff through is go to the Bible and pick it up. Maybe I would always encourage, start with the Gospels, the stories. We talked about Jesus tonight. Read about him, learn about him, look at those documents, look at those historical documents, see what they say, see that they're credible, see that the story makes sense, and find out for yourself. Maybe that's something that you can do during this period of restrictions. Check it out. But it's been really good to have you join us again, as we say, whoever you are, wherever you're from, and whatever you're thinking about these big questions, it's great that you can join us. We will be back again next Tuesday for more Trinity Tuesday. We're looking at another big question next week, which is going to be, is being good enough? Is being good enough? Giving you a little hint, the heart of Christianity is the cross. Is being good enough? So we'll be thinking about that next week. Do join us again on YouTube, Facebook, or on Zoom, and do come and check out what is going on at Trinity Church. Check out our website, check out our Sundays if you want to follow along and find out more and keep the conversation going. But thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again shortly.